So I rarely get lucky enough to bring on a guy who has so many different facets to what he's done in his career. So I'm super excited to bring you guys Eric Kocher. Eric is is just an incredible talent. He has been able to navigate himself through multiple political campaigns at the highest levels. We're talking presidential campaigns, all the way to small town campaigns and all different levels of service throughout, and is now a senior VP at a multi-million-dollar energy company. An amazing conversation. I'm looking forward for you guys to hopefully give us some feedback on this one because he's a unique dude. Without further ado, Eric Kocher. All right, guys, so here we are. I've got, finally, after we've tried more than a handful of times, Mr. Eric Kocher. Welcome, sir.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. Glad to finally find some time to get away from the kids for a little bit.
Yeah, there you go. I was gonna say this. We've been trying to figure out a way to bring you in. I must have had 10 segues where I was like, where am I gonna put him at? I had energy, which is you. I had politics, which is you.
Right.
I even had a police officer on, and that's coming down the pipe here in the very near future, in the middle of when it was a nightmare a few months ago. And I was like, ooh, Eric be really good either before or after that. And it was just one of those things where I was like, man, this scheduling thing is a nightmare. So, dude, I'm glad to have you here. So I want to dive right in, man, and talk a little bit about, your whole, from the political climate right now. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what got you going to politics, and then that segued into energy. So tell me a little bit about starting at Webster here in St. Louis, how that all came together.
So I went to Webster University as an archaeology major. I was going to be an anthropologist digging out in Arizona. I was going to study Greco-Roman archaeology. That was my plan.
Really?
I graduated high school. I was like, I'm going to go live in ancient Greece times. And
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, like Indiana Jones style. And I decided instead to do an undecided major. And so I took a couple of classes, got a sampling, a couple of different things, and I aced like 4 political science classes in my first semester. And I was like, oh, I kind of know this stuff. So
Yeah.
I've looked into it. I was like, what could I do? And so I ended up getting a bachelor's degree in history with a political science emphasis and focused on political science and like international law. A lot of history based on that as well. But that was kind of a continuation of growing up in politics.
Right.
My family, we didn't none of my family members ran for office or were really elected officials outside of party positions up in Northeast Missouri. But I grew up around campaigns, volunteering, knocking doors, doing the parades, doing all the activities and the golf tournaments and the barbecues and all
like
that
local, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, you're the chairperson of this type of thing.
Yeah, so my parents were like Northeast Missouri Central Committee and Democratic Club and all of that growing up. And, one of the guys that I grew up around is a former state representative from that area. He was a state rep for like 20 years and then now is a lobbyist and has been a lobbyist for the last 20 years.
Wow.
And so he went to my church, family friend type of deal. And so we were always involved in his campaigns. That led me to meeting state senators. I got to meet Congressman Harold Volkmer when I was a kid, and hanging out with just political people and political events. And so I wasn't planning on doing that as a career, didn't even know that was a career that you could go down. I just thought like my parents volunteered, I would do something to volunteer. And I think it was 2002, Gene Carnahan, U.S. Senator Gene Carnahan was running for re-election against Jim Talent. And my student advisor came to me and said, hey, I got an internship opportunity on Senator Carnahan's campaign. You were the first person I thought of. And so I did 3 or 4 months as an intern on there and learned a lot and saw a lot and saw these people that were like grinders, just They just bounced from political campaign to political campaign, hopped from one
House of Cards type of
just
lifestyle. Yeah.
really. And so I was like, man, that really intrigued me. And so what was funny was the person that I interned under, who was the volunteer coordinator on that campaign, ended up being the campaign manager on a state rep race in 2004 and pulled me on as the volunteer coordinator.
I remember you telling me at one point, and we're going to dive into that later, when we were up in New York.
Yeah.
And you said something to the effect of like, it's crazy. You meet one, you do a little bit of work for them, and by the time you're done doing that little bit of work, there's 5 more opportunities, and you just kind of meet with that person and go that general direction. Is that pretty much how that whole world works?
It's 100% who you know and who you meet, and what you do for those folks. So my challenge was I was more volunteer and people related, and so my focus was on the door knocking, the phone calls, the volunteer recruitment, and working on that.
The groundwork.
Yeah.
Okay.
The problem is you need somebody to raise money before you need somebody to knock on doors. And so like I would always get hired after the finance person. So my job was to always not my job, but my focus was to always try to find who was closest to the next ground game that needed to kind of get mobilized and get moving, that already had their finance in line, already had their money lined up, and we're ready to now take that next step. So if you think about it, like phase 1 is build the campaign, start raising money. Phase 2 is build the volunteer base, build the organization, and then it just stacks on top.
And then manage all that
and
too.
Then manage all
you have to manage that entire process. Because I remember you said you're like, hey, I got to write a budget. I got to make sure we've got enough people. If not, I got to recruit new people. This whole field management thing is a giant operation per se.
Yeah, I mean, and it could be anywhere from tens of thousands of dollars budget to, a couple $1 million for different races, just kind of putting together. On one campaign, my field budget was roughly $250,000 that we were using to pay people to go out and knock doors and have conversations and drive that message of the candidate out there. And that was like maybe 40% of the whole budget. So like we're talking, multi-million-dollar budget we're trying to put together in order to win a state Senate race.
Right. And so you get through your undergrad, do you go further? That's what I remember.
I did. Well, I went back. So I went and did a couple of campaigns, and then
got your feet wet. Yeah. Loved it, or enjoyed it at least.
Yeah. No. I got my biggest experience working on the McCaskill campaign, where basically I was responsible for, I'd say 75% of the voter turnout for St. Louis County.
Wow.
Like my territory encompassed everything but North County.
So you're looking at metrics, and the metrics show that you were hitting the right people, and they were coming back and paying the dues at the polls.
And then driving that number, just like nowadays when I'm talking sales or sales metrics, it's like, well, what do we need? Let's up that number by an X factor of what we can go find, and then up that by another X factor of what we need to get done every day in order to find those people. And so that was my responsibility, was to go out and figure out those numbers, figure out how many doors, how many phone calls, how many people did we need to talk to in order to feel comfortable that we had found enough voters. So I did that on the McCaskill campaign in 2006, her U.S. Senate race, which was a win, and it was great. I was thinking about going to law school at that time, took the LSAT, applied to WashU, applied to SLU, applied to, I think, BC or BU, something up in Boston. I was kind of in that mentality of like, do I stay in Missouri or do I go to the Northeast?
Go to the East Coast and make a name in that space, right?
Well, it's
because DC's LA for you.
Exactly. Yeah. The same way, if you go to LA and you go and your waiter is an aspiring actress or actor, you go to DC, your waiter is an aspiring politic. Like it's somebody that wants to be a legislative aide. They want to work for an NGO. They want to work for a congressman, but they're out there like waiting tables, trying to find that job.
That first job.
So it's
get
like
them through the door.
It's like it's funny because you got a waiter in LA that's going to sing you a song, and you got a waiter in DC that's going to give you the history of neocon liberalism and conservative ethics for the last 30 years. So I thought about that for a while, and then I found out that I could go back to Webster University without having to take any more extra tests and things, and so I went back and got a master's degree in international relations. So.
Okay, and so you get done with that. You're finished at Webster. You've seen the real campaigning world, the political climate, the campaign folks that you want to kind of emulate in a way. What happens next?
So I was kind of cool. About that time, Barack Obama was starting to pick up some traction, and I was still kind of on the Hillary fence in 2008 during the primary. I thought that Obama was too young. I thought that he was not seasoned enough in the U.S. Senate. Like, he didn't have enough U.S. foreign relations experience. Like, he just was not ready to take an international stage. And so I was still kind of on the Hillary camp. I did a couple of small campaigns, and then about the beginning of the summer that year, I found out from a friend of mine, one of the guys that was working on a larger campaign than I was at the time. He was like, "Hey, I'm going to float your resume over to the Obama campaign and see what they got going on." And they picked me up, and that was an interesting campaign to work on, because for all the campaigns I'd worked on, even the big ones, there's a very much corporate feel to it.
Right.
There's middle management, there's upper management, there's senior management, there's the people that you interact with on a daily basis, and then there's names that you hear that are in a hallway down the hall that the only time you've ever met them is if you've either screwed up so badly they know your name, or you've done so amazingly that they got to come find out who you are.
Bob wants to see you. Do you know in what context
Right.
Bob wants to see me?
Yeah, you start running through that Rolodex. All right, what did I do in the last 2 weeks? I don't think I spoke to any press members. Maybe that one guy with a hat was secretly. So you start thinking about that stuff. So yeah, they got me on there. What was interesting about the Obama campaign is they had those same levels of management, mid-management,
Right.
senior management, but it also really felt like going to summer camp. Everybody was there not because they wanted to advance their career.
They wanted to be there.
They wanted to be there. They believed in the guy. They believed in what he could do. They believed in that hope and that change that he was promising, that kind of cult of personality. And so in an office of like 15 people, me and a friend of mine that came on board that had done a couple of campaigns before, we were seen as the hacks. We were seen as the hired guns, the mercenaries that just come in and we don't care about the people. We just need to win the race and that type of stuff.
Who was that? Was that Jordan?
Yeah, it was Jordan.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
I pulled Jordan on after the primaries, and was like, "Dude, they pay. We got health insurance. Like,
He was a Webster guy too, right? Same type of. No. Okay.
No. Jordan, I think he took a couple college credits. I don't think
Not officially in it like you were in it, and you were like, "Dude, just get in here."
Yeah.
Smart guy though. I've had more than a handful of conversations with him.
He was running 2 or 3 primary races at that time, like one big one and then a couple of subsidiary ones, and they took a bad beat on the primary, and I was like, "Hey, I got an opening."
Again, you know somebody?
Right.
Hey, come on over here. I got something for you.
I'll give you West County. Come interview for the position. And so
Who doesn't want that? That's a good one to have.
So it was, but yeah, that was that was the interesting thing was like, I'll give you one example from that campaign that was kind of funny was, we never talked about negatives. Like, at the end of the day, you're like, you always do the breakdowns, or at the end of the week, you do a breakdown where you're like, hey, what went well this week? What didn't go well this week? What was some of the positives and negatives, pros and cons? They did positives and deltas, because delta is the Greek symbol for change. So what went well today, and what could we have done differently to change the outcome? So not what we did bad.
Interesting philosophy to use, yeah.
Yeah. So
we didn't do negatives.
We don't do negatives.
We have some areas for improvement.
Exactly.
Okay.
What can we change for tomorrow?
Yeah.
So we did positives and deltas every day. So
I like
it was interesting. But I got to meet James Carville, the Raging Cajun.
The Raging Cajun. Oh yeah.
That was a cool experience. The only thing was they didn't tell us who was coming. That was the one thing that made me mad. Was Michael J. Fox and James Carville were both in St. Louis for events, and they told the field staff. And actually, I'm getting this confused. This was the McCaskill campaign I met James Carville on. Sorry, go back 2 years. But they had Michael J. Fox and James Carville in town. And they didn't tell us who was coming. And they came to the office. Everybody was in the office, and they're like, "We have a special guest coming." And then in comes James Carville. And I'm like, I was so mad at the senior management, because I was like, I was not prepared to have one of the greatest political minds step foot in my office and start out by going, "Hey, y'all know who I am. You know what I've done. Who's got questions?" And that was like how he started the whole thing. And
you're sitting there like, hold on a second. Let me grab my book. Here we go.
Where's that book that, like, he's got like 3 books out by this point. I'm like, I've read 2 of them. I'm like, oh, where's that? if it was Michael J. Fox or whatever, I had like 100 questions for him already, but I didn't know it was James Carville.
It was James Carville.
I forgot on the Obama campaign, I got to meet Kristen Bell and Rashida Jones. So that was
there you go.
So that was, there's a little bit of, that's some of the things that kind of keeps your interest on those campaigns is, you're grinding it out. We're working 50, 60, 70-hour weeks.
Yeah, I was going to say, the weeks were crazy, right?
Yeah. Oh, no day off. No day off until the campaign.
Monday through Sunday,
Yep.
10, 12 hours, 15 hours a day. I remember when you worked the Sifting Campaign here, coming to your office and being like, dude, are you going to take it off? You're like, dude, I'm leaving at 9 p.m. I'm back here at 7 a.m. I'm working till 9 p.m. And that's going to be that way for the next 2 months. And I'm like, whew.
The only time I ever got days off was, so I got on that campaign in March, early, because by that point I'd worked to a point that I could be a campaign manager and kind of direct more than just the field operations.
Right.
So they brought me on early, helped me kind of build that operations. We put together the budget. I worked with the finance manager. So we had 2 campaign managers technically on that, whereas like one guy was focused on the people and one guy was focused on the dollars. And so I got a few days off then, but once we got through the primary in August, it was just 100 miles an hour.
100 miles an hour straight through. Yep. So you worked field. Mm-hmm. What would have been like, and obviously we're going to turn the corner and talk a little bit about what you're doing now, but what would have been if Eric Kocher stayed in politics, what would that have looked like, roughly?
I think it looks like what I did the last year or two that I was doing campaigns. I jumped off of, so I left after the Sifting campaign was over. I went and worked for.
That was after Obama, right?
Yeah, this is 2012.
And then you went from there to, I remember Sifton was here locally, which he won, which was awesome.
Yeah,
and then
gave Jim Lemke his first ever career loss as a politician, which
is awesome. And you were his field ops manager for the entire campaign.
Yep,
which was sweet. And the one where I went and met up with you, you were in New York. You were in Brooklyn. That was public schools.
No, that was.
Or no, I'm sorry.
That was so that was city council. So New York has 50 city council seats, and 25 of them were up for re-election that year. And so that was the problem. 25 of them were up, and only like 5 of them had people that were running for re-election. So it was like 20
seats available.
Yeah, and so 20 brand new faces. 20 candidates, and so this independent expenditure sent me up there for, I think it was like 3 months to work on a field campaign and help out like 15 candidates that they picked throughout the 5
3 things
boroughs.
that happened up there that were weird. Remember the truck? The truck.
Oh, the truck went missing. Yeah, it was a van, 15-passenger van. Went missing. Found it under an overpass, up on blocks, gutted, the whole thing. And like, what's funny is one of the guys who lives in Park Slope. He's from Park Slope. Like, he worked in the mayor's office. Like, he
knew the area, knew
politics.
everything. Yeah.
The day that truck went missing, the day that van went missing, he goes, "We're not getting it back in one piece." And they're like, "No, somebody's just doing a joyride." He's like, "No, like, this is Brooklyn, like that." And I think it actually got stolen from the Bronx. But he was like, once he heard about it, he was like, there's no way that thing's coming back in one piece. And it was a rental. So luckily we had the insurance and all on that. That was
a cool experience. The area was very different too. You could tell, there's a lot of culture, ton of culture in that area.
Yeah. My landlord that I was renting, I was Airbnb for like 90 days. He was, born in Haiti, I believe, and then immigrated over, was a correctional officer in the New York correctional system for like 30 years, retired, and now makes money renting out rooms in his house.
Airbnbs. Which Airbnbs there are astronomically expensive, and you would not think what you're going to get for that kind of money.
Yeah.
But
still cheaper than a hotel at Times Square.
Still cheap. Yes. Incredibly cheaper. Yeah. That was a unique experience for sure. So you get through all the campaign stuff. I remember pretty distinctly the wife said, "Hey, kids, home, that whole American dream you've been working on through campaigns for all these years. Wouldn't mind doing something similar to that."
And I kind of got sick of it too, because I lived in a suitcase. I jumped off I went from one campaign to another, went to New York, came back, went and lived in Kansas City for 3 or 4 months, came back, worked on a St. Louis campaign for a while. And then the teacher thing was a statewide. So I was traveling a couple of days a week.
Yeah, I remember Kansas City. You were going there all the time. That was everywhere.
Yeah, so I'm bouncing back and forth between the states. I mean, like,
the hours in traveling combined is probably the thing, right?
Yeah.
You're in a suitcase, but you're also never really in the place where you're sleeping because you're at work. So
And I work for Democratic campaigns, so a lot of times we're parachuted into places that are not really the best, not really the safest. I mean, this isn't, I wasn't sent down to South Beach to go work on a political campaign. I was sent to Bed-Stuy. Like I was a stone's throw away from East New York.
Yeah, I remember fucking walking through that neighborhood more than a couple times in the morning and at night being like, oh, shit, we're going to get murdered on the way back to this apartment.
There was a shooting the first day that I sent my canvassers out to go knock doors. Like there was a shooting where I dropped them off probably about 3 blocks away. Some people opened up fire at open fire on a baseball field.
Jesus. Yeah.
So like, no, I don't think anybody was killed, but there was like 3 people injured and stuff like that. And I had an 18-year-old kid quit that day. He was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, there was a shooting over there. Like, just don't go over that way. Like, knock doors this way." And he was like, he handed me the clipboard. He's like, "I'm out." I was like, "Do you want to finish your shift?" And he goes, "No, I'll take the train. Like, I'm done.
I'll take the train. I'm out of here.
I'm out.
There's no way I'm doing this." Yeah.
So there was a little bit of it was a little bit of a conversation with Amanda, a little bit of conversation just kind of with myself, being like, do I want to bounce? And I got a buddy of mine that still does it, and he was just in this last year, he was down in Florida right before the presidential. Before that, he was up in Minnesota. He was over in Ohio.
So he's still doing it. Just boom, 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 boom,
but
everywhere.
He's just all over the place. So
wow.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, it's good money. It's great money. But it's you never know where you're going to go.
The wear and tear, doesn't equate the dollar amount.
No,
exactly.
No.
So you get out of that. You decide, all right, I'm going to plant my feet here and I'm going to start working. What do you do?
Abstract.
Right.
Yeah, I called you.
Yeah. Like, hey man, I'm gonna work. I'm ready to.
Yeah, I was like, Jay. I was like, I'm back in St. Louis. I need a corporate gig. Nobody knows how to read my resume because if I listed every campaign off as an individual job, it would be like 30 jobs.
I remember us looking at your resume and going, dude, it's gonna look like. I mean, because I think you did have. They were kind of bullet pointed.
Yeah.
Like you didn't go crazy into detail. Like political campaign advisor, field communications supervisor, but then there was like ... and there was 50 of these campaigns. You're like, Jesus.
Yeah.
So I made the sales pitch for you, and I was like, listen, if he can manage all that, then he can manage this. And you were thrust into that world.
Yeah, which was great. It was really a great opportunity to kind of get my feet wet in sales. I'd always hated sales. Anytime I was in between campaigns, I ended up working retail. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, I hate people. I hate sales. Like, I don't want to deal with this anymore.
Your career was like the military because it was like that, where it was like, okay, I'm going to deploy.
Yeah.
Come home and do something.
Yep.
Then I'm going to deploy again. It was very similar in that way. I remember that.
And I had a relationship with a guy out of D.C. I had a relationship with this consulting firm out of D.C. and Minnesota, and they would just call me up and say, hey, we got this thing. It's 2 months. You want to go? Like at one point, this wasn't from them. This was from another one. But at one point, somebody offered me a gig. It was like 30 days. This guy's going to ride his bike from Kansas City to New York to raise money. And we'll pay you like $5,000 a month plus expenses to just make sure that he doesn't die between here and New York. Like there'll be check-in points. He's going to ride his bike along the highway. You can drive ahead, go hang out, do whatever you want to do. Just make sure to check in with him and make sure he hits those checkpoints along the way.
They're going to pay you the equivalent of almost $60,000-$70,000 a year.
To follow a guy.
To follow a dude on a bike.
And the reason why they called me was because the dude was a political consultant. So he was like, hey.
You have common interests, common values, good conversation.
Yeah. And so that was kind of the way. So there was like little weird stuff like that would pop up. And, or I need you in Ohio for a week to do signature. Like I did this thing in Jeff City where we gathered signatures for like a week. I got paid like $2,000 for a week of work to gather signatures to go drop off at senators' offices and be like, hey, these people don't want you to pass this thing, or hey, these people want you to pass this thing. You know, it was just like ground.
Jeff City, as boring as they say.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, they have a mall, they have some chain restaurants that people are usually familiar with, but
just.
I think the one draw of Jeff City is you're 45 minutes away from the lake.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be a problem, especially in politics. Got one of those little badges. I work for the governor's office.
That's right.
Great, come on my boat.
Yeah, we don't show those. We don't show those badges. We don't show those badges. Those are the. Yeah, we don't flaunt. We don't want people to know. You know, like, is that the Obama campaign getting drunk at the bar? No, none of those. No, nope, that's not us.
That guy works. He cleans the bathrooms.
Yeah. No, so I did abstract. I jumped into abstract. It was really great to kind of see. Because like I said, I was really adamant that I didn't want to do sales, and so getting into abstract and seeing what business to business sales, what it was like.
Yeah, that was your way to get your wings and get your training.
Yeah.
And then I remember that was when you started getting into what I would call the kind of newer age technology world, which is where you are today, but you had a stop before you made the stop at EFS. Tell me about that.
3D printers.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Interesting.
So I was working for a company that sold Siemens software, and they also had a separate, they sold a couple of 3D printers, and nobody was really focusing on that. I was having a hard time with the software. Like, I kind of understood it, but I wasn't an engineer. So the owner came to me and was like, hey, nobody's focusing on these 3D printers. What if you just focused on those? And I learned a lot about two things. I learned a lot about the jewelry industry, and I learned a lot about the manufacturing industry.
Yeah, because you were able to print prototypes, right?
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, and on the jewelry side, you can print these wax pieces that are the molds. That then when you fire them, the wax melts out and it leaves the thing that you do the casting for the piece. So when they want to like cast something out of gold, first most places will kind of brag that they do hand etched wax, but if you're trying to do volume, you can't have some like 80-year-old guy back there like hand carving custom jewelry.
You got to get it done with a 3D printer, cut your time in half, and maximize your profit.
Bingo.
Right.
And then they would be able to use that. So I sold those. I learned a lot about the jewelry industry here in St. Louis, but then they flew me down to Houston.
Yeah.
To do like there's like 2 diamond buildings down in Houston, which are just manufacturers. You go in and every floor has a different company. It's like 13 floors, and it's just these rooms of people that have loose diamonds. It's basically where everything comes in, all the gems and stuff come in.
Oh shit!
And then they sell out of there. I mean, it's all locked down. I got thrown out like twice when I was trying to talk to different people because I was like, "Hey, I'm going to this company," and they're like, "They don't know you," and I'm like, "They do," and they're like, "But they say they don't know you," and I'm like. But they do. They just don't know me. They know my product, and I'm the guy, schlepping the product. And they're like, yeah. So, but that was interesting. And then the manufacturing side to be able to print functional parts, and that gave me a lot of insight into just how CEOs and CFOs think, all the different levels of management that you have to deal with on these manufacturing companies to get the deals done. I mean, it's just like I would have to go in and talk to a design engineer and be like, hey, this is how you design it to print it. And they're like, okay, great. And then they're like, here's our engineering manager. And I'm like, okay, so here's where this piece, because you care about something different than this guy.
So very much team sales. Like you kind of, you had to get them there, have them interested, obviously, but then be able to pull an engineering person aside, a business development person, like everybody.
And you had to know, like, one of the things that I learned from there, the owner of the company was very helpful in helping me with this strategy, and Siemens had a lot of training with this as well. The guy designing the part cares about something different than the engineering manager that manages that guy. And the VP of engineering cares about something completely different than those other 2 guys do. And the CFO cares about something completely different than all 3 of those guys do.
Right.
So if I'm talking to the guy sitting at the computer designing the part, he doesn't care about the cost of materials as much because all he cares about is, like, how do I design this microphone?
Dude, I read this book. I'm going to forget the author, but it's called If Harry Potter Ran GE. Mm-hmm. And that's what it talked about, was these segmented conversations for each level of management.
Yeah.
Like, you can have that conversation with a director, but the guy he's managing probably doesn't care about the same thing that guy cares about. He's looking at metrics. The accounting side's looking at dollars. The way in which you segment those conversations are completely different. Being able to navigate that makes you very successful in business.
And being able to walk onto a shop floor and go, what's your biggest headache? And they go, oh, these fucking parts break all the goddamn time. And I'm like, yeah, so what if I could fix that for you? Well, I was like,
that'd be great.
Yeah, like, how do they stand up? I'm like, yeah, here's a part. Try to throw it against the wall, slam it down, like, try to break the part. But then if I go into like a VP of engineering's office, like it's a conversation of how much do you pay in raw materials? Like what materials do you use to make those parts? What if I could take your raw material cost and drop it by 95%? And then, yeah, you might have to make more parts because they don't hold up as long as the steel part that you're getting manufactured.
Right.
But it costs you 5 cents instead of $500. So,
oh my gosh,
like, what's the break even point on that? You know, I mean, we were seeing ROIs of 6 months, 18 months on $100,000 purchases. I mean, it was like you're gonna make your money back.
Day.
Yeah, it was insane. It was insane. And then the pushback that I got was, well, we always did it this way, and I'm like, ah.
Yeah. So they were. Yeah. I mean, manufacturing, man, it's gonna be the last thing to adapt.
Yeah.
I mean, they're die hard on the way they've done it. I saw that in software with Comparo was I used to go to O-Ring people all the time. We try to sell this propulsion software. We were like, listen, if you buy this, I guarantee you your plant floor operations are going to run smoother.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big targets was O-Rings. And I hated dealing with them because if you are a fifth-generation family that's been making rubber O-Rings for the last 5 generations, you will not change shit. No. You're going to do it the same way. And worse off, Billy Joe and Billy Joe Jr. and Billy Joe Jr. He's talking to all 3 generations, telling them, you're going to do it this way, right? And they're like, yes, Papa. Yep. Like, no questions asked. That's the way it's going to work. I could have showed them it was going to be an ROI like you wouldn't believe, and they just were like, nope, get out.
The other thing that I learned from there as well is I learned how to – I'm very much – I read a book a long time ago. I think I was at Abstract at the time, and they talked about the different types of sales guys that are out there. And I don't remember any of the other types because I figured out which one I was, and I just ignored everything else. I was like, yeah, I don't need that. But I figured out I'm the challenger sale. Like, I'm the guy that's always going to challenge you. I'm always going to ask questions. I'm
if I can do this.
Well, and it's like one guy was like, oh, we got this guy. He knows how to, he knows how to do everything. I was like, great. He's been there for 30 years. And they go, yeah. And I go, what's your retirement strategy? And they go, what do you mean? I said, Billy Bob's going to retire someday. Who's gonna take like his wealth of knowledge? Are you training anybody right now? And they're like, well, no. What happens if he is? I was like, he's probably 60-something years old. And they're like, yeah. And I go, and he works in manufacturing. And he goes, yeah. And I said, those guys usually don't take very good care of themselves health wise. Like, what if he keels over and has a heart attack on the shop floor? What's your plan B if that guy dies with all those plans in his heads? And they're like, don't say that. That scares us. I said, well, let me be your plan B. Like,
yeah,
here's my solutions. And so it's like, poking those holes into their thing. They were like, oh, our process is great. It's like, is it though?
Yeah, exactly. Poke your strategy to death until you keel over.
Yeah, just, find the weak points. It's almost like, it's like old school fortifications, when a king would
this
fortify
can't
themselves.
Be sunk. Watch this.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, so you're there. You're like, all right, making a transition. You meet Paul, who was on the show, which was awesome. And his episode's going to be rolling out, believe it or not, this coming week, which is kind of interesting that we're talking now.
Mm-hmm.
And you get introduced to EFS Solar. You get introduced to their company, to what EFS Energy does and how they do it and what they need. And then what happens?
Well, so being in politics for as long as I was around environmental. I was around people that were thinking renewable energy. So I'd always been around folks that talked about those type of things and how do we get our dependency off of oil and how do we, stop giving out billions of dollars of subsidies to companies like
It's
BP.
Fascinating to read the amount of ties between. I did not realize I think I told you this. I bought this $70 book.
Yeah.
That had not only practical installation knowledge, but other things. And one of the things that it really tied you to was the national security portion of solar.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty crazy. I had no idea. The ability that we would have if we were able to shut down traditional power the way we do now and focus on the sun side.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievable.
Well, and the other history that's interesting to see is where those tax subsidies come from on the gas side. Is like BP was a small mom and pop shop back in the 60s and 70s that was trying to compete with Saudi oil, and so the U.S. government was like, we're going to help out small businesses and we're going to give you tax breaks on your oil and blah blah blah, and they just never went away. So now that hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax subsidies, or even tens of thousands of dollars in tax subsidies from 40, 50 years ago has now turned into $6.5 to $7 billion in tax subsidies that goes to the oil industry because they just never changed the rules for 50 years. And now BP is BP, and they don't need billions of dollars.
Yeah, they don't need your credit anymore. Yeah.
So
exactly.
I was watching. So I was paying attention to that stuff, and then I heard what Paul was getting done and what EFS was doing around the area, and I honestly didn't know how lucrative solar was. I just knew that it was the next big thing when it comes to energy. I was like, it was either that or windmills,
yeah,
the giant wind turbines, and those solar seemed like something that I could get into. I've always been the guy that's like, you give me a product and a pitch, and I'll figure it out.
Right.
And so talked to Paul. He was intrigued by my commercial experience and being able to sell to CEOs and CFOs through Abstract and through the Siemens company that I worked with.
And also the government relations side.
Yeah.
You can understand how legislation works. That has been a weird obstacle that I've seen in that industry and just in general. Understanding rebates, understanding tax credits, understanding legislation that's on the floor being debated.
Right.
Knowing where it stands. That's
and then being able to read the bills when they come out. Find out what it's about. Like, what did they really get done? And that's something that, we don't have the time or the capacity to keep an eye on all that stuff. So, being tapped into the different organizations that support that is what's really helped us out as well. So I jumped over and started selling. I started, of course, with residential and learned the ropes. I figured I'd rather screw up on a $20,000 job instead of a $2 million job out the gate.
No kidding, right?
Hey, Paul, sorry I cost you a couple $100 on this project, not like tens of thousands of dollars on this project. And so learned that and got a couple of, did pretty well. Kind of came out the gate rolling.
And now you kind of act more or less as kind of a second in command, handle a large portion of what happens there from a standpoint of obviously sales because you manage that entire department. But you're also, like I said, you're kind of the guy who can read the bills, know what's going on with rebates, know what's going on with tax credits. You're the financial end. Remember one time you said, I got a minor in finance from EFS.
Yeah. Yeah. Between building budgets and figuring out cash flows on the political campaign stuff to now making sure that we have dollars coming in, when they come in, what's our pay points. Like, that's something that I really wanted to focus on when I took over the sales department was, when do we get paid?
Right.
And how can we shrink those windows down? How can we be more efficient so we can get paid more often?
Right.
And so that's something that I've been working on, and, trying to get our install timeline down to a point where, it's almost like knocking out widgets. Hey, we're gonna do this many installs. We're gonna
forecasting and following that model, continuously over and over and over again. So here's another question for you, and this is for our viewership. Why is it such a fight or a battle for sustainables in general, like specifically solar?
So the biggest thing that you're going to run into is every kilowatt hour of energy that we save or produce, whichever way you want to look at it. Like, if I put solar on your house or your business, you're saving energy, you're producing your energy. So every kilowatt hour that we produce, Ameren can't make money off of. That's why it's a problem.
So we threaten their
entire
livelihood.
Those are investor-owned utilities. They have stakeholders. They have profit shareholders. They have people that have bought interest into Ameren, ComEd, Mid-America, Dynergy, like whatever those companies are that are out there. Vectren, I think, is another one that are in this that's more in Indiana. But any of those companies that are investor-owned utilities, they are a for-profit business. So solar, while as minuscule as it is a threat to their overall.
It's a long-term play, and they look at that and like, you're in their SWOT analysis is a big piece for the long term.
And the cheaper it becomes, and the more people realize that they can produce their own energy, and then if batteries become a thing and generators become a thing, and then we start having off-grid situation, more and more off-grid capability. You have people that are totally cutting the cord. I would think of it as what Ameren is afraid of is they watch Spectrum, Charter, AT&T. They watched all these big cable guys just get absolutely swallowed up by the Netflix and streaming services because they wouldn't offer an a la carte. There was a whole thing like,
take it or leave it. It's this much money. Yeah.
And so they got absolutely swallowed up by all
And
these
then Netflix said
streaming
$3.99 a month, and you can watch whatever the hell you want when you want.
And we'll send you I remember back in the day they sent a DVD. Hey, we're gonna send you a DVD every you send us one back, we send you one back out. Ameren sees the same thing. At some point, people are gonna start cutting the cord to Ameren and not relying. And then they have this infrastructure that they've built. They have the substations and the towers and the lines and everything that they've done to build this infrastructure.
And that's just a zero-sum gain at that point.
Exactly. And then they don't want to become a maintenance company, because then all they become is a maintenance company on the power lines and the substations and the transformers and the plants, peaker plants that they've built out. They just become a maintenance company on that. So there's no profit in maintaining infrastructure.
So companies like EFS, are they in danger of being swallowed up by them eventually? Because Ameren's got a big budget, right? I mean, they got a lot of money.
I don't think they would swallow us up as much as what they do in Missouri. So in Missouri, they push us out of as many markets as they can. So they allow us to do community solar, not community solar, but like they allow us to do home residential solar, commercial solar. They allow us to put solar on people's properties, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense financially.
Right.
They allow, and I say allow that because they are the 900-pound gorilla in the room. We don't get to do anything in Missouri without Ameren's green light.
We have to get their blessing, per se. Right.
And so, but what they keep us out of is they keep us out of the community solar. They keep us out of the utility side. Ameren's building that giant new facility out in Montgomery County. All of that is going to be owned by the utility. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to eat up as much as the renewable energy credits that they have to produce, because every utility company has to, they have metrics like, hey, you need to be 20% renewable or 25% renewable or 30% renewable by certain marks. They could invest in that and then charge you more money, which is what they did with community solar up with the Lambert project. They built this 1 megawatt community solar project. It got over applied for. And from what I've heard from the customers that have signed up for it, they're paying more for energy, but they're willing to because it's coming from green. It's coming from renewable energy. So the idea is that at some point that scale will tip. That'll cross, like as coal energy rises and community solar stays flat, like the rising cost of utilities will kind of balance itself out.
And you'll be like, hey, we're going to put solar panels on our house or move to a community that's powered by solar.
In contrast, in Illinois, there's third-party developers that are coming in, other private companies that are coming in and developing these community solar projects. And so it's opened up the market to be able to have more than just Ameren or ComEd building these community solar projects. So that's the difference between those two states is just, we at EFS, we could have jumped into that if we wanted to. We could have jumped into community solar projects and done those.
Are the future of tax credits good, bad? How does that look? Does it look good for 5 years, 2 years?
It looks strong. 99% of Green New Deal candidates won their election this year. So
that answers that question.
We have a lot of people. We have a lot more people in D.C.
People on the Hill and on D.C. are looking out for renewable folks.
There's a couple of holdouts in the Senate. The biggest one's Mitch McConnell. So he's our wild card because in order to extend the tax credits, we have to get it through the Senate.
Okay.
So.
And then I always do this, man. 3 questions at the end of it. Let's see. I'm trying to think of some good ones that I was gonna come up with 3 good ones for you. Tyson this weekend, win or lose? Mike Tyson's fighting this weekend.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what to call on that because did you see the rules that came out?
You can't knock each other out.
Right. So
seems like a huge mistake. And as Dana White said, not possible.
Yeah.
Pretty hard to enforce.
Yeah.
I hit him.
The first time
he got knocked out.
And the first time they see blood, they call the fight. I would say Tyson's got the edge on that fight. Like, I think he just looks like he's in, the videos that I've seen and the stuff I've seen on social media, he just looks like he's back in beast mode it almost looks like he hasn't lost a step in 30 years.
The videos I've seen, it's pretty arguable he's as good as good now as he was then.
Yeah, it just and I hate to say it, it just depends on what the refs are paying attention during this. What the officials are they going to call it when somebody gets a little blood coming out their nose? Like
it'll be fun to find out.
Yeah, this would be the gentleman's game, the gentleman's sport. Blood on the field, cancel play.
Cancel play, exactly. So Cardinals Blues.
Which one do I support?
Which one do you like more?
Oh. That's
you got to pick, I know.
I've been a Cardinals fan for a lot longer. I didn't discover the Blues until I was in college.
Okay.
Went to my first Blues game, but man, I'll watch every Blues game. I can't sit through a full season. I will say I liked the COVID shortened season this year. 60 games, knock it out, get in the playoffs.
There is a huge argument that is a better format for baseball.
It was so fast. It was so
Everybody's
fast.
like, hey, you know what? It makes it not as boring because everybody waits for the playoffs. First half of the season, you're excited.
Yeah.
Middle happens. You don't really care. You're just going to the game.
Right.
End is exciting.
And we always talk about Cardinals opening day in St. Louis, biggest event of the year. It's amazing, but then nobody talks about the Cardinals for another 4 months.
Yeah, 4 to 6
like
months,
we start talking about them again and around the All-Star break, trying to figure if we have a good team, if we can figure out if we're gonna have any All-Stars.
Yeah, are we any good? Probably not.
Are there
All
any
right,
All-Stars? No, then I don't care about the All-Star break. And then, but I will tell you, I've learned more about. I think for me, I like the Blues a little bit more. They have that kind of. They're fun to watch. I will say this: they remind me a lot of the Chiefs right now. The Chiefs are fun to watch.
Oh, I should have threw that in. That's a good one. I know you would have answered the Chiefs, though, so I'm glad I didn't.
No, the Chiefs are fun to watch. They're a young team. They're hungry. They got championship. Like, they just smell it. I think the Blues they're still, 3 to 4 years left in their window to get another Stanley Cup.
Probably.
I'm calling it right here in the next 5 years.
5 years.
We're going to get another Stanley Cup out of the
I'll have
Blues.
you on in another year or so, and we'll reevaluate our decision making. Last but not least, Jameson or Johnny?
Jameson.
That's
not even a no-brainer for me. That's an immediate, like, just Jameson.
Well, hey, man.
I do like the Johnny Blue, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think you can really go wrong.
No.
Johnny Walker, right environment. It's a win across the board.
I guess
Any
that's the
color
other
you
thing,
pick.
too, is that, like, Jameson's my go-to drink at a bar.
Yeah.
So, like,
It's your day-to-day.
Yeah.
I can get it anywhere I want it.
Yeah. And it always tastes good.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
I'm definitely going to have you back because I've got a bunch of stuff I want to follow up on, especially probably sometime after the inauguration. I want to do something. Like I said, we're going to do a fun debate format, but I got to find somebody who would want to hug you when we leave, but want to crush your face when we get on a microphone.
I'm all about that.
We're going to find that guy or gal. Awesome, man.
Cool, man. Well, appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks.